Welcome. I am the Loud Little Ducky. Today we are going to go over part 1 of Michael Maraschini versus Laura Owens. We've got the TEDx, we've got the chicken soup for the soul, and Laura's declaration of the incidents. So let's jump right in. In April of 2016, Laura Owens begins relationship with Michael Maraschini. According to Michael via court records, he tried to end the relationship prior to their upcoming Iceland trip, but was coerced by Owens' parents because she was threatening them with unaliving herself. Ron Owens, Laura Owens' father, begged Michael to stay in contact with her because her life was at risk and that he would help him get out of the relationship afterwards once she was safe. Text messages between Maraschini and Owens' parents revealed their appreciation for his help and later their condolences as his own stepfather was reportedly battling terminal illness at the time. Jumping to December 2016, on December 30th, Laura Owens and Michael Maraschini traveled to Iceland together. This is where that Iceland talk comes in, and it's just funny because in The Bachelor with Clayton Echard, Iceland was where the overnights were, but obviously this happened way before then. A trip that Owens later describes in her TEDx talk. In the TEDx talk, Owens claims that Maraschini subjected her to verbal and physical abuse throughout the duration of the trip. A woman by the name of Karen later submitted a statement in support of Owens, claiming she witnessed Maraschini verbally abusing Owens on the flight to Iceland. So she has a witness in this one. Her stranger. Life-saving power of kindness to strangers. This is going to be Owens' TEDx talk. It was posted on January 6, 2022 with 102,490 views. This women's TEDx series is about women's experiences and how moments define their lives. There is discussion of abuse in this TEDx, and her description is, for Laura Owens, everything boils down to the stories. Whether it's the stories we tell ourselves in order to succeed, the stories we tell each other to uplift and inspire, or the stories we share with the world. She's dedicated herself to capturing the human experience in a unique way. The daughter of National Radio Hall of Famer Ron Owens and award-winning journalist Jan Black, Laura is committed to putting her own spin on the family tradition. This talk was given at a TEDx event using the TED conference format, but independently organized by a local community. You could learn more about TEDx talks at TED.com/TEDx. A good one for you to check out if you haven't is Emily D. Baker's TEDx talk that she did. She has it on her YouTube channel, or you can search Emily D. Baker TEDx and you'll find it, but it is a really good one. But now let's listen to what Owens has to say.
December 30th, 2016. After months of planning a once-in-a-lifetime trip to Iceland, it's finally here. It's finally time to go on flight 162, San Francisco to Reykjavik. A tall man boards behind you and offers to put your carry-on bag in the overhead bin. You graciously thank him and relax as you settle into seat 21H. This plane ride should be a time to drift off to sleep and dream about seeing the northern lights, to wonder what it's going to feel like to soak in the Blue Lagoon, to go dog sledding for the first time. Only you can't because of the noise in the background. And no, it's not the roaring of the jet engines. It's the loud voice of the man sitting behind you who helped you with your luggage. He's speaking to a woman who's incessantly sobbing. He's spewing insults at her, demeaning her, and the more she cries, the harsher they become. She can barely get out a word to respond to him through her tears. Turn your brain on, he says in a mocking tone with a laugh, followed by, use your words. He changes the subject. He tells her, you haven't accomplished enough for a woman who's in her late 20s. People aren't being honest with you when they compliment you on your work. They're just trying to be nice to you. I'm telling you this because I care about you. She keeps crying and he sounds disgusted. Look at you. You've never been my type. You're ugly. If you cared about me, you would want me to find someone I'm attracted to. She composes herself well enough to ask the question you've wondered all along. Then why do you want to be with me, she says. Every time I bring up breaking up, you tell me you don't want to. He responds with, I feel sorry for you, okay? That's why I'm with you. Because no one else would want to date you. Because I'm a nice person. This seems like a totally different man than the one who put your suitcase away. You glance back just to be sure, and yeah, it's him. You brought your sound-canceling headphones. Easy solution, you think? You can just tune them out. But even through them, you hear his voice. Don't poke the bear, he warns her. You look back and forth. You mean this is how he is when he hasn't been poked? How could he be any worse? You look left. You see a flight attendant coming down the aisle. You could pull her aside, tell them they're being too loud. She could ask them to be quiet, and that would stop it. But as much as you try to ignore it, your gut tells you that this woman is in danger. But then again, she's also a stranger. So it's none of my business, you think. You try to convince yourself to do nothing. But then you hear it. She asks him, what can I do to fix myself? He thinks for a minute and says, I don't know. Kill yourself? She continues to cry and says, I'm so sorry. In a serious tone, he follows up with, if you truly love me, you want me to be happy. And maybe if you're in heaven, you can help me find my soulmate and look down and smile on our wedding day. This man is sick.
I don't buy that.
There's a napkin under your cocktail and a pen in your purse. You quickly scribble a note, but you can't decide whether or not to give it to her. At least jot it down on paper. You write, Dear girlfriend, I know the Lord had me overhear your conversation to let you know that you are a very beautiful young woman that should have a man that makes you cry with wonderful laughter, not bullying. You are being abused and he will never love you like you deserve. I'm very concerned about you and I'm praying for you. Run from him. Get help and protection. He doesn't care what you think or say or do. He is a very sick man and will make you sick if you stay with him. Please take this to heart and get help fast. You decide to sign your name and write down an email address that you rarely use. Towards the end of the flight, the man leaves his seat to go to the bathroom. This is your chance. You peek back through the seats and your heart sinks. Because you see it. You see her. She has a face now. She's someone's daughter, someone's friend, and she needs help. You look down at the note. What would you do? Would you listen to your heart and pass it to her, thinking that the best case scenario is that it helps her? The worst case scenario is that she chews you out as you get off the plane. Or would you let your head get the best of you and fall back on that mindset that has become so conditioned to focus on our own problems, not on those of a stranger? What would you do? What would you do if you knew that in passing her that note, the woman sitting in the row behind you would tell you that you're the reason she's not 6 feet underground, and that she would thank you for saving her life from the TEDx stage? My name is Laura Owens, and as you can tell, I wasn't the hero in this story. I was the crying woman in seat 22H. The stranger, Nancy, made the courageous decision to hand me that note. In her mind, she could have easily justified keeping it to herself. She could have just said it was none of her business. But she saw me as an individual, as someone of value, as a person that somebody cared about, and she made it her business. In that brief period of time, Nancy saw him for who he was, for how I couldn't see him. I felt like I was on a roller coaster ride. We'd had a fairy tale start, and then it came down fast. It seemed like overnight, his charm and compliments turned to criticism. His comments became more and more menacing until finally, the verbal abuse became physical. The first thing he did once we landed in Iceland and got to the hotel was ask me to pick a number. Not knowing why, I picked 40. He said that was how many times he was going to slap me. He did, and then he choked me. The less oxygen I breathed in, the more he smiled. And for the first time in months, he praised me. Good girl, he said. My mind flashed on the note. He was truly sick, and I was in danger. I begged him to stop, and he stormed off. I thought he'd left the room. So I went to my backpack, and I reread the note. I had no idea that he was standing behind me. He told me to hand him the note. He said, I knew she was listening all along. She doesn't know what she's talking about. His face was red with anger, and a vein popped out on his forehead. He tore up the note, figured it would never be brought up again, but luckily I'd taken a picture. Even with all of that drama, we made it to dinner. He abruptly left right before the check came. He said he needed to go shoot footage for his Instagram and told me not to go find him. He said he didn't want to be seen in photos or videos with me because it would hurt his chances of becoming Insta-famous, which was a big goal for him. He thought that if he appeared to be alone, he would appear single, and that would get him a lot of female followers. My heart was broken, and I had no sense of direction, both literally and figuratively. I mean, truly, I had no service, and I was lost. I asked 2 people for help finding my way back to the hotel, but they didn't speak English. I stumbled around the streets of Reykjavik in the highest heels I owned and in a sleeveless dress that was as inappropriate as you could get for the snowstorm I was in. The fireworks went off at midnight, and I could hear people in the distance cheering. I could feel their excitement about the idea of a new year, new hopes, new dreams, new goals. And then there was me, looking worse than ever after crying for the better part of 24 hours. I slipped into an alley. I was numb from the blanket of hopelessness and unworthiness I felt. The only wish I had for the year was to redo my life and become a different person, since my boyfriend had convinced me I was a failure and I couldn't fix myself, but that wasn't going to happen. The last thing I wanted to do was die, but he had convinced me that there wasn't a place for me on earth. He said that he didn't want to end our relationship, but I couldn't understand why he didn't want to when he treated me like he hated me. He said that I brought it out of him, that it was my fault, that he'd never been violent before he met me, that I was responsible for his transformation from the all-American boy to American psycho. But the thing is that I had no idea what I'd done wrong. I was the same person I was when he met me. I was giving, I was kind, I was loyal, I was supportive. I looked the same. All of the qualities he said he liked so much about me hadn't changed. I was so confused and I felt so alone. I knew I couldn't tell my family and friends what had been going on. I didn't even think they would believe me. After our first date, I had proudly told them that I now believed in love at first sight. I told them that I thought he was the one, and after seeing us together, they agreed. Even when the relationship started to go south, he still acted like he adored me in public. He only abused me in private, and he had convinced me that I was the problem. But as much as I tried, I couldn't figure out what my problem was. As I sat in that alley, just lost in my thoughts, my mind flashed to that note from a stranger that I'd been handed on the plane. My fingers felt numb, but I was able to unlock my phone and open up the photos of it. For the first time in a long time, I felt like maybe I wasn't crazy. Maybe Nancy saw something in him that I didn't. Maybe I needed to take a step back and try to look at our relationship from the perspective of an outsider, from that of a stranger. of how it looked to the world instead of how it felt to me. I weakly stood up and wobbled back to the hotel. When I got to the room, he was livid. Maybe it was because he'd had too many drinks, or maybe his Instagram post hadn't gotten the attention he thought it would. Or maybe he was upset because he didn't know where I was, and for a few hours, he'd lost his power over me. I hoped he was mad because he realized that I'd taken Nancy's note to heart and that I was now onto him. Not surprisingly, the rest of the trip was a nightmare. It was impossible to enjoy the beautiful surroundings when I knew that once we got back to the hotel room, I would be abused. I thought constantly about Nancy's note, even after we left Iceland and got back to the United States. Every time he said or did something awful to me, I took it less and less personally. I was finally able to admit to myself that she was right. He was never going to love me like I deserved. I knew that after what he'd done to me, he could never be the one, but I didn't know how to leave. Towards the end of our relationship, he attempted to suffocate me. I remember exactly where I was when I felt almost all of my spirit, my soul, all of my fight dissipate. The feeling of his hand on top of a pillow, on top of my face, pressing all of his weight, more than twice mine, into me in an effort to silence me once and for all. I blacked out, but I woke up. I was a different person when my eyes opened. I tried to leave and he wouldn't have it. He was following me around my neighborhood. He was banging on my door at night, telling me that he knew I was home when I didn't answer the door. So I had to do something that I never thought I'd do. I called a DV group and I asked for help. Within minutes, I was connected with a wonderful woman on the phone, another kind stranger who said that I was safe. She said that she believed me and that I wasn't alone. She said that one day I wouldn't be embarrassed to call myself a domestic violence victim and that I would be proud to call myself a domestic violence survivor. That woman connected me with more kind strangers who owed me nothing but played a huge part in saving my life. They helped me get a restraining order against my ex-boyfriend, which I still have today. And guess who wrote a witness statement for me? Nancy. She was stunned that I reached out to her, but she was happy to help in any way she could. Stranger after stranger after stranger. Kindness after kindness after kindness. This was the kind of world that I wanted to live in. I look back now and I wonder what life would have looked like for my family and friends if he'd succeeded in taking mine. Nothing would have been better for them, as he'd convinced me they would be. My sister told me that I would be the maid of honor at her wedding when we were teenagers, long before she met the love of her life. She found him and got married this year, and I cried more than anyone else at the ceremony because I was so happy to be there, to be alive, to be with her. Before my sister walked down the aisle, she said she couldn't imagine anyone else standing by her side on her big day. I said, I'm only here because of Nancy. She said, because of a little note. And I think about what I would have missed if she hadn't written that note. I think about seeing my father actually run in the pool in his first swimming lesson after seeing his movement being so affected by Parkinson's disease for 21 years. My mom and I had endless conversations about my relationship and how Nancy's kindness had saved me. That was the catalyst for the podcast we started together, where people who inspire us talk about their moments of growth, discomfort, and change that led to happy, successful times that they never thought were possible. And after nearly 450 interviews, I've learned that most people say there was one person who changed everything for them. Their stranger, their Nancy. I've often wondered if I would have developed the courage to leave on my own and realized that even if I did, it would have been too late. One more time might have been too late. The difference between him being my abuser and my murderer was this. That's it. One more second of his fingers pressing on my neck. One more second without air, and I wouldn't be here. For the first time in my life, I had a seizure, then two, then three. My body was run down. It couldn't have taken any more abuse from him. I know I am only standing here because a stranger told me I didn't deserve it. I know that at some point in our lives, we've all been in a situation where eavesdropping, interrupting, and intervening, things we were told to never do, could have changed the trajectory of someone's life. We just don't realize it at the time. How easy is it to turn our heads away when we see someone in public in distress? To pretend that we have more important things to do than simply acknowledge their existence. To bury ourselves in our smartphones, wasting our time, airbrushing our appearance to get more meaningless likes. Today, it's easier than ever to be the main character of our own story. We can move through the world immersed in our technology, seeing the rest of humanity as just a backdrop for our own story. I'm the first to admit that I'm guilty of that, of thinking that I could take control of the narrative of my life by writing an Instagram caption. Of thinking that as long as it looked like I was living the perfect life, I was. For example, I posted this throwback to Iceland shortly after arriving back in the US, which got comments like, so jealous and looks amazing. Now here's where I was when I actually posted it. In the hospital, after my abuser and I had a particularly rough night. Can you imagine the reaction my friends would have had if I posted my reality instead of the one I portrayed online? If I said, I need help. I've been in an abusive relationship. I need to figure out how to get myself out of it. And I want to know that one day I'll feel like my old self again. What I really needed was to find the courage to leave him and to find myself. I needed love and support, not followers and likes. Maybe if I'd been honest, I could have helped someone. Maybe someone would have seen that post and I could have been someone stranger. I wished I'd been more courageous like Nancy. So life ambled on and I continued to portray myself as having it all together, as someone who had never experienced anything difficult in life before. For a long time it seemed easy. Then one day it didn't. The most traumatic chapter of my life was the most private. If I didn't tell the story for myself, I owed it to Nancy. Maybe people would be nicer to each other if they realized the power that their actions have. I didn't need to post a sad story about being a domestic violence victim. I needed to tell people that I was a survivor because of a stranger. But I needed to find the courage to do so, and so of course I logged into Pinterest to search for inspirational quotes by my icon, Brené Brown. It was like she was speaking to me. I got chills when I read it. When we deny the story, it defines us. When we own the story, we can write a brave new ending. That night, I told my story on Facebook. I was done pretending to be perfect, and I decided that anyone who would look at me as weak for telling it didn't deserve to be a part of my life. I was overwhelmed by the response, in a positive way. As one woman wrote, pure love for a stranger, and another wrote, angels are everywhere. We just need to be listening when they talk to us. Each time that we see the people around us as members of humanity, not as strangers, we take a step toward restoring hope for others. We become links in a chain of kindness. I didn't know it at the time, but the purpose of my trip to Iceland wasn't to save my relationship with my ex-boyfriend like I thought it was. The purpose was to get Nancy's note and to share with you the life-saving power of kindness. Why else would I have been sitting behind her on flight 162 on December 30th? What if I picked the same flight the day before or the day after? I thought that the day of the flight was one of the loneliest in my life, but I was so wrong. It was the day that changed the entire trajectory of my life. It led to the most fulfilling, meaningful friendships based on vulnerability and kindness. It led to deeper relationships with people I love, and I've gotten to have experiences I never would have gotten to have if I'd stayed with him. All because of a brave note from a stranger. If you ever find yourself sitting in a chair like her, I hope you'll have the same courage she did, even if it's uncomfortable, to take a step outside your comfort zone and say something when your gut tells you something's off. It just might save a life, change a life, or begin a life anew. You might feel like you're crazy, and it may be way out of your comfort zone, but maybe, just maybe, you'll help that person see the light at the end of the tunnel. Maybe you'll end up being the stranger they never knew they needed. Thank you.
Would you be that stranger in a situation like this? It's very hard to decide, but if you know your answer, let me know in the comments. Here is the Facebook post from July 22nd, 2020. This is posted on the Nobody Told Me podcast page, which is the podcast that Owens and her mother have together. And so it says, from Laura Owens, I wanted to share what an eventful made me leave the abusive relationship. What eventually made me leave the relationship I was in. This note on a cocktail napkin from a very brave stranger. I was on a 9-hour flight with my ex-boyfriend, and for much of the time he was putting me down. He warned me not to post any photos with him because he was embarrassed to be seen with me on social media with someone as ugly as me. In the same breath, he said that if we weren't together, no one would want to date me. He said nothing about me was lovable. I had come to believe him, and all I could do was nod and cry at the worthless person I was. Side note, I never understood why victims stayed in with their abusers until I was in the situation myself. To this day, I don't think I can explain it well to anyone who asks me why I didn't immediately leave. There's many reasons. Fear, that you love them still. It is easier said than done, for sure, but it will be okay on the other side. A few hours into the flight, he went into the bathroom. As soon as he left, the lady in the seat in front of me passed me this note. When I quickly read it and put it in my pocket out of fear that he would see it. Throughout our trip, I kept it with me and read it over and over again. As broken as I was and as worthless as I felt, the words of this woman gave me the one universal feeling we all needed: hope. The stranger left her name and an email on the note, and as soon as I found the courage to leave the relationship, I contacted her and let her know. She was shocked to hear from me and stunned that it was the catalyst for me leaving. She said that she had questioned whether or not to give it to me, but that something had compelled her to. We talked about the randomness of it all and where I would be if we had not been booked on the same flight or if she had been seated in a different row. That's the beautiful thing about life. Just when you've lost faith in humanity, a stranger serendipitously appears and renews it. I hope that if you're ever in the situation that she was, you have the courage to reach out to someone like me. It might save a life, change a life, or keep it the same. Or just make someone think you're crazy and intrusive. Who cares if you are? You probably won't see them again. But maybe, just maybe, you'll help that person see the light at the tunnel. Maybe you'll end up being their stranger. This is a better picture of Nancy's note, which we now know is Karen's. She just changed the name in the TEDx talk because she didn't know if she wanted her real name being used or not, so she changed it. She wrote on the Iceland flight, which she read in her TEDx talk. Chicken Soup for the Soul with Amy Newmark. Strangers on a Plane and the Life-Saving Power of Kindness. This you can find on pretty much probably all podcast places, definitely on Apple or Google Podcasts, which I think Google is now a part of YouTube, their podcast, I think I heard something about. And the description is, hey everyone, it's Amy Newmark with your Chicken Soup for the Soul, and today I'm pleased to introduce you to Laura Owens, who I met when I appeared on her podcast. Going into podcasting was a natural progression for Laura, whose father was a National Radio Hall of Famer and whose mother is an award-winning journalist. In fact, Laura and her mother Jan are co-hosts of the self-help podcast Nobody Told Me. Please do not take their advice, because Owens is crazy and she doesn't have any control of her own self. She can't help herself. And I don't know about Owen's mother, but she's an enabler and isn't honest with Laura. But if you have problems with your ads on podcasts and they're not catered to you, you can visit podcastchoices.com/ad choices. That's just a tidbit information that she put in there, so I'm just going to relay it too. And so when listening to this, I will have the link below if you want to listen to this yourself. But the host, Amy Newmark, called Owens mature, which that's a first. Beautiful, accomplished, went to Penn State, and is an equestrian. If it can happen to her, it can happen to anyone. Also stating that Owens' TED Talk was released in January of 2020, and it was one of the top-ranked TED Talks in America at the time. Host said that said Owens is a thought leader, and that's why she wanted her in the anniversary book and on the podcast. Owens never saw the stranger's face, supposedly. The stranger gave a rare email due to being worried about the boyfriend tracking her down. The stranger was afraid of him. Now, I don't know if the stranger was actually afraid of him. I don't know if Owens was scared for the stranger or if it was the stranger that was actually afraid. I don't think she was too afraid of him, but that is what she said. Owens says she didn't even realize she was in an abusive relationship, really, which I highly doubt. Owens also says she blamed herself for her boyfriend's actions towards her, and she went to the hospital due to the abuse and took pictures when she was there. Owens reached out to events to share the story. She was looking for many places to tell the story, and she found a TEDx Women's event, and she wanted to inspire others with her speech on Karen, on the stranger. Now we're in March of 2017. Maraschini ends the relationship with Owens. She claims he impregnated her, but later in a court document it was revealed she admitted she lied about that, apologized about the unaliving threats, and there was never any evidence of physical issues between them. Once Maraschini ended their relationship, Owens began stalking him, which led him to contact the police. That is when she accused him of physically assaulting her and R-ing her. And it is presumed that those are the reasons she has an order of protection against him. She claims to have aborted the alleged pregnancy, too. So I don't know where she admitted she lied in the court documents. I know she apologized about the threats to herself. And even though she has some pictures, I don't know if they are actual evidence of physical abuse when looking at them. I don't really have a good picture of them, but the one she showed in her TEDx, it didn't really show much. Now we're going to start getting into Owens' declaration. This was filed by the Clerk of Court on March 29th, 2018 in San Francisco County Superior Court, Owens v. Maraschini. Owens' attorney at the time was last name Justin Cook, and it says please see attached declaration of Laura Owens in support of her request for a restraining order against Michael Maraschini. And she signed it. All right, here we start with the declaration of Laura Owens. It states, I, Laura Owens, declare as follows. I make all the statements herein of my own personal knowledge except as to those matters stated on information and belief, and as to those matters I believe them to be true, and if called as a witness, could and would testify competently thereto. What's interesting about this top paragraph is that statement, the very last statement, true, and if called as a witness, could and would testify competently thereto, that is also mentioned in both of the motions to quash subpoena for Chase J. Jones on the Google and Patreon. And it may be a statement that's used a lot, but if Chase J. Jones is Laura Owens, as some people believe, then maybe she wrote both of these. And so that was just something that just stood out to me. Again, it may just be something that people put in every single declaration. I don't know. So it says, history of the relationship. Mr. Maraschini and I were romantically involved from March 2016 until late fall 2017. Contrary to what he alleges in his declaration filed on January 22nd, 2018, we did not stop dating in March 2017. I met Mr. Maraschini in March 2016 through The League, a dating app for professionals that matches people together based on LinkedIn and Facebook profiles. Well, we know she loves the LinkedIn. His profile said that he was in real estate development and that he went to California Polytech Institution. And Exhibit 1 has screenshots of his profile. So she likes the real estate guys. He asked me to dinner and I accepted. Initially, Mr. Maraschini was very charming. In the early months of our relationship, we saw each other often and seemed to have a lot in common. Mr. Maraschini showed interest in my career. I am the CEO of Quartet Farms, a company that buys and sells show horses. It's always funny to me, and I'm not saying that family-run businesses don't become big and, they're CEOs and things like that. But it's always funny that it's like, I am the CEO, even though it's ran by my family and my parents own it, or they started it. And it's like, it's kind of like saying I was the valedictorian in a class of 6. Like, good job still, but it's not as big of a task becoming that particular person as it is for many. But anyways, he talked about his own career ambitions and said he was a real estate developer and that he had his real estate license. He also frequently talked about his many job offers at big development firms. I wanted to be with somebody who was career-oriented like I am and thought we were a good match. We talked about my love for animals and animal welfare, which he also claimed to care deeply about. He also often talked about his alleged relationship with celebrities. He liked that my father, Ron Owens, is a famous local talk show host and was excited at the prospect of meeting celebrities. Red flags if this happens. And so she's painting him out right here to be brags about himself. He dated a celebrity. He's using her for her father and to meet other celebrities. He's like many job offers from big development firms. Like, he's just this big guy in his career. This is how she's painting him. Like, this is what he thinks of himself. So it goes on and says, in or around late May or early June 2016, I was asleep when I suddenly was struck in the face by Mr. Maraschini. I don't know exactly how he hit me. I think this either with his elbow or his fist hit me near my eye. I can't say for sure, but I believed he may have been asleep and involuntarily hit me somehow. I had a black eye for a day or two after this. One of his friends told me that one of his ex-girlfriends also broke up with a black eye because Mr. Maraschini, quote unquote, accidentally hit her while he was asleep. So this is where she's starting to introduce a little bit of the maybe he started becoming aggressive. Maybe it wasn't actually an accident because it did happen to two people that he dated. But again, it could have been an accident if it even happened. I know some wild sleepers. You can get kicked, punched, smacked, lots of different things. If you have kids, some of those kids are wild sleepers. You end up with feet in your face, or they're at the opposite end of the bed. Lots of different things. So it can be a true accident. And if it's happened to two or more people, maybe that proves that he is a crazy sleeper. So she's just trying to start introducing some supposed accidental stuff. In June 2016, Mr. Maraschini were out for a walk. While we were walking along the water, he grabbed me by my jacket and pushed me towards the water, acting like he was going to throw me in. I had previously told Mr. Maraschini I don't know how to swim. Later during the walk, we were passing by a shrub when Mr. Maraschini used one of his hands to shove me in. He did these things as a joke, but they felt somewhat aggressive. Again, pushing more into this. It might have been a joke. It might not have been. But he was aggressive, and it could have been a playful moment. I know many people, guys too, is sometimes a way that they flirt. You walk by maybe a pool and they're like, oh, I'm going to throw you in. And they don't throw you in. Or when you're walking, you push them so that they'll get off path or maybe accidentally get in the way of somebody. And then you come back and you push him and you're like, ha ha ha. And it's just playful. It's not serious. Now, do some guys not know their own strength? Yes, that can happen too. But whether it was aggressive or not with her, I think she's just trying to read into the situation. In June of 2016, I found out that I was pregnant, and I felt very conflicted about whether to have the baby or terminate the pregnancy. I was diagnosed with polycystic ovary syndrome in 2010 or 2011, which can cause infertility. I was afraid I might never be able to get pregnant again, but also did not necessarily feel ready to have a baby. I told Mr. Maraschini about the pregnancy and shared my feelings about terminating versus having the baby. Initially, he was supportive and giving me some time to think about the decision, but said he thought it would be best if I had an abortion. So you are April, May, June. So 3 months into your relationship with this guy, you've ended up pregnant. And I can understand not being sure about having it. Not a great way to start your relationship, but with Owens, this is how she starts all of her relationships, with pregnancy. Now with polycystic ovary syndrome, it can cause infertility. That is true. And maybe that's what started this, is that she just lies about being pregnant and tries to pretend to experience it, but because she knows or whatever, she's not going to. And for somebody that's supposed to be having issues with infertility, she sure is very fertile getting pregnant in every single relationship she has. Wrap it up. Have people wrap it up. Use birth control. Stop sleeping with everybody. A day or two after I told him, Mr. Maraschini called me on a trip while he was with his friends and said he decided that an abortion was the best option for us. When he came back from this trip, he told me that if I had the baby, he would never want to meet the baby or be a part of his or her life, that he would hate me for going through with the pregnancy. Guys are like this. And sadly, at this point, they can give their thoughts. Some of them are not in a nice way, but it's their way of getting the point across that they don't want this at all. The guy doesn't really fully have a say in this, it is the mother's choice, which sometimes can stink for the guy because, he didn't want to be in this situation. Granted, if you didn't want to be in this situation, you would have used protection or you would have just stayed abstinent. But they aren't prepared for it. They aren't ready for it. And then the mom's just like, yeah, but I'm going to keep it anyways. And sometimes the girls keeping it, it's not out of true intentions. They see it as a dollar signs for child support or whatever, or maybe like an Owen situation, she sees it as a way to trap them in to be with her. But, and you should want to have something to do with your kid if it does end up being born and things like that. I can understand being mad at her and not wanting to have kids with her, but if you can avoid her as much as possible and still be a dad, then I think that's a good idea. But he's not the only ones that said that to her. Clayton said it too, but I think Clayton was in a different situation because he didn't believe she was pregnant to begin with, at least not with his kids. So he said it. It is hurtful, but nevertheless. He said that if I had the abortion, it would prove to him that I was the type of girl he wanted to be with and would show him how much I valued our relationship. He said he wanted a future together and could see us having kids down the road, which seems to be what all the men say to get her to abort the babies. But he wasn't ready to be a father yet. He promised to be there and support me after the abortion. So she is starting in on he was a manipulator. So he is a narcissist who thinks highly of himself. He has started little things that might be physical abuse, and now he is manipulating her and threatening that he will not ever have anything to do with her or the kid. So he's introducing these things so that it all leads up to the big, I need a protection order. You see what this guy has done to me since the beginning. Says, one night in late June 2016, Mr. Maraschini and I had dinner with my parents and were discussing my pregnancy. They knew I was pregnant already. Even though I had not made up my mind yet, Mr. Maraschini told my parents that we decided to do the responsible thing and have an abortion. Mr. Maraschini pressured me to make an appointment at Planned Parenthood for the abortion. When I didn't do it fast enough, he scheduled it for me because I wanted to be with him and thought we could have a future together. And since I don't want to bring a child into the world without a father, I decided to go through with the abortion. In July 2016, I terminated my pregnancy. So, this case happens in California. And we have a moment in Clayton's case that also happened in California, supposedly. When she went to Planned Parenthood, in between all her stuff in Scottsdale, Arizona, she went, apparently, to Planned Parenthood in California. Now, while she was doing horse riding events. So, do I think she actually went to Planned Parenthood in California? No, I do not. I don't see where there was time. But Do I think that she used the positive HCG test or other things from Planned Parenthood in 2016 in the Clayton Echard case? Yes. I think that's why there's Planned Parenthood California in the Echard case, is because she was reusing stuff from this Maraschini case. What do you think about that? That's my theory. In the days following my abortion, I felt sad and started feeling immense guilt. I felt selfish for choosing my relationship with Maraschini over the baby. I grieved for the child that would never be, and started to feel depressed. On several occasions when I tried to talk with Mr. Maraschini about how I felt, he got angry and lost control of his temper. He'd scream at me and his face would turn bright red. He'd ball his fists and pump them at his side while pacing around. I was afraid of this side of him, which I hadn't seen before. Okay, in recording this a couple of times now, because I have had technical issues, I've had to read this sentence several times, and still, I cannot see what this actually looks like. So his hands are balled into fists, and then he's just pumping them at his side. And so is he just opening and closing his fists at his side while he's walking around? Like, is he pumping his arms or his hands into like his thighs? Or does he have them like up close to his face and he's just like chicken winging it with his fists while walking around? Like, I can't see this image in my thing, because she said he's pacing, so like he's just continuing to do it instead of just one like fist and open it and then closing it again or something like that. Like, I can understand doing it just a little bit, but just pacing and opening and closing your fist or beating yourself with the fists, I don't know. It's an odd way to put whatever was happening. About 1 week after the abortion, Mr. Maraschini got mad, and I told him I felt guilty about the abortion. He screamed at me. He said I needed to get over it and that he didn't want to stay with me for longer if I couldn't. That's a crappy thing to say. 1 week after. Like, if this was the actual case, guys, don't do this. I felt beyond betrayed since he promised to be there for me throughout the healing process. When I told him this, his response was, I would have said anything to get you to abort. Which many guys will. This is where she is saying he manipulated me into getting the abortion. And really, that's why you should take things with a grain of salt when you're in these situations, because are they just saying it to say it? Or are they saying it because they really mean it? Between July and November 2016, things between Mr. Maraschini and I were rocky. I continued to struggle with the feeling of sadness due to the abortion. I would frequently try to talk to him about this, but whenever I brought it up, he just got mad and yelled at me. He'd say that I should be over it. He'd tell me that he wanted someone more cheery, like his ex-girlfriends were. He would regularly demean me. For example, he constantly told me I was worthless and ugly, and said that nobody would want to be with me because of my depression. Ladies, if you have depression, or men, people will still want to be with you. Now, if you're just a Debbie Downer all the time and maybe you won't get help for it, that might be a different story. But just because somebody suffers with depression or is on medications for it, doesn't mean that somebody won't find you worthy still, because you still are. He criticized my performance and said that he was just stating the facts by telling me I was bad at my job. What job is he talking about here? Like your actual career, work job? Or your job as a girlfriend? He started calling me crazy and telling me that I was mentally ill. He'd tell me that I was bipolar and needed to be medicated. I had never been depressed before having an abortion. I don't know if I buy that. But maybe this is where her crazy started. But I don't think it is, because of some news that had just recently dropped about her having a case 2 years prior to this one. So, no, you've been crazy for a long, long time. You've been crazy over 10 years, at least 2 by this point. It was also during this time between July and November 2016 that I was spending a lot of money on Mr. Maraschini. In the beginning of our relationship, he would pick up the check when he went out for dinner, and we would split it. After a month or so, he stopped doing this and would allow the bill to sit on the table until I paid it. By late summer of 2016, it became implied that I would pay for everything. Then, starting in or around October 2016, Mr. Maraschini wanted to go out to fancy dinners several times a week, which I paid for. In November of 2016, he started calling me his sugar mama. In 2017, after he lost his job, he started asking me to pay for his rent, which I did a couple of times. He also asked me to take him on multiple vacations and buy him a $10,000 watch, which I did. Which I think she only bought him one $10,000 watch, but she does talk about when she bought one. So I don't think it's multiple watches. I think it's just one, but she's just mentioning in the summary of things. And then she'll tell the specific story about when it was. I felt like he was taking advantage of me, but I loved him. So I did what I could to make him happy. Why do you love him? Like, you're in the beginning stages of this, and so you have 3 months in, and he was already not great to you by the time that June or whatever had gotten around. So you fell in love with him in 3 months. There's not a time on that, but if all these things that you said were true, like he was aggressive or he was putting you down and stuff, how were you in love with him? Like, most people aren't going to fall in love with this person because usually their niceness lasts way beyond 3 months, but I guess some are that way and people fall for him. Or they find some reason to stay with him, but we know she's desperate to be in a relationship, so she will do or deal with anything as long as somebody will be with her. I really wanted our relationship to work, but I felt like Mr. Maraschini did not like me and didn't want to be with me. When I would ask him if he wanted to break up, he said he did not and would tell me he really cared about me and thought we could work through our issues. This happened multiple times through our relationship. I felt like he wanted to continue dating me for money and connections that my father's local fame provided, but he didn't care about me. Okay? This is the sign that you need to get out. And she's mentioning he's using her and he wants to meet these celebrities. In November 2016, Mr. Maraschini and I went to a Tony Robbins conference, which he asked me to pay for. He said the conference would help our relationship by helping me get over the abortion. I don't know how Tony Robbins is going to do that. Maybe he can with all his wisdom scamming on stage. But Maraschini, he was struggling at work and told me this conference would give him some more direction to find out what he really wanted to do, which he said would make him a better partner. During the conference, Mr. Maraschini emotionally and verbally abused me, often in front of people. For example, journal and sharing within a group was an important part of the conference. Every time I shared with the group what I had written, Mr. Maraschini laughed at me and made fun of me and put me down in front of everyone else. I was in tears throughout the conference because of his beratement. Once when I was crying, one of the people who worked for Tony Robbins Corporation approached me and asked if I was okay. They told me they had overheard Mr. Maraschini putting me down and asked if I wanted to break up with him publicly on stage. I felt ashamed and said no. Where is the witness from this conference? I don't know if I buy this story either. And you mentioned in your TEDx talk that he would abuse you in private. He would act all nice and charming in public. But we have a plane incident and now this incident supposedly, and these are public. So is it private? Is it public? Is it both? You said it was only in private in one story. After the conference in late November or early December 2016, Mr. Maraschini and I took a break. He told me that it was unnatural for me not to be over the abortion and that he didn't want to be with someone who was depressed. He told me he would only be with me if I was medicated. Everybody should have that rule when it comes to you. You need to be medicated at all times. You need help in your brain. During this time, I sought treatment for my depression that Mr. Maraschini insisted I suffered from. Well, you said you were depressed and that you weren't even depressed ever before you met him. And so you didn't think you were depressed, but you were going to go get treatment for something that you didn't think you had? No, you went because you thought you were suffering from it too. A couple of weeks later, he asked me to dinner at my favorite restaurant, and we started seeing each other again. On December 9th, 2016, I felt suicidal. I reached out to my parents for help. I was overwhelmed and felt bad about the abortion and Mr. Maraschini's hatred towards me. My parents contacted Mr. Maraschini and pled him to be supportive and intervene. I did not want to talk with him and ignored his calls for several hours. My parents called the police and had them come check on me. The police took me to the ER where I was given IV fluids. I spoke with a psychologist and she talked to the psychologist and she was released later that night after I calmed down and no longer felt like I was a risk to myself. Contrary to Mr. Maraschini's allegations in his declaration, I was never treated in an inpatient facility. Okay. I don't know why he would lie about that because that's easily provable. My psychiatrist adjusts my medication after this. So is this psychiatrist the person you were seeing for your depression that you just met? Have you had the psychiatrist for a long time? And it usually, if you're threatening things like that, you need the IV medications or IV fluids and adjustment of medications. Usually they're not going to release you quite yet. They're going to want to keep you and observe you unless you AMA'd yourself out because they want to make sure that you're not going to go and do it and you're just saying that you feel better and you're not going to do this now. They want to make sure your meds are working, that you're talking clearly, and truly get a gist of what's actually going on. On December 30th, 2016, Mr. Maraschini and I flew to Iceland. We had been planning this trip since early November and decided on Iceland since Mr. Maraschini wanted to go there. He said that the trip would help our relationship. So this is number 2 thing that they do to help their relationship. He told me everything he wanted to do in Iceland, and I planned and paid for it. The trip cost at least $15,000, and I emptied my childhood savings account to pay for it. That's your fault. You're the one who decided to do that. You didn't have to do that. I know you maybe wanted to do something nice for him, but you could have said no, or I don't have the money for that, or one day, whatever, but you didn't have to empty your childhood savings account for the trip unless you wanted to. During the flight from San Francisco to Iceland, Mr. Maraschini berated me nonstop for hours. He criticized me for nearly everything I said or did. Maybe you were annoying him, and he was at his breaking point. If I turned my head to look at him when he said something, he criticized me for turning too quickly, telling me that my reflexes were unnaturally fast, and that there was something wrong with me. Well, I agree with the something wrong with you part. He criticized my career and told me I was bad at my job and I was worthless. Once again, what job is he talking about? He's just putting down your career all the time, or is he just saying you're bad at your jobs as a girlfriend? I want to know what he means by this, or what she means by this. He told me I was ugly and that nobody else would ever want to be and date me. When I would try to kiss him and cheer him up, he'd tell me I was gross and a bad kisser. He said I was bad in bed. Then he said he wanted to have a threesome since sex with me was so boring. He suggested a threesome with my sister or a black man. He said it would turn him on to watch someone else have sex with me. I told him no, and I felt uncomfortable. He seemed to enjoy putting me down. His criticisms went on for hours. I cried on and off throughout the entire flight. So you were trying to kiss him while he's verbally abusing you? Like, you're like, here, give me a smooch. No, you didn't. Nobody's trying to give kisses when people are being jerks. Ugh. About 6 hours into the flight, Mr. Maraschini went to the bathroom. I stayed in my seat and was crying. A passenger in the row in front of me slipped me the note, a true and correct photocopy of which is attached here to Exhibit 2. And then it has what the note said. It says from Karen, and then she gives her email address. I was shocked when I read the note. For the first time, I started to realize that Mr. Maraschini was emotionally abusive, which is not something I wanted to all acknowledge. After reading it, I quickly put the note in my backpack to make sure he didn't see it. I was scared that he would lose his temper and make a scene if he found out about it. I also did not want him to know who gave it to me and fear that he would lash out at her. So you were scared of her for her, not she was scared of him. For the rest of the flight, I tried to avoid talking to him since I didn't want him to get mad. And so maybe he was having a bad day on this flight and was annoyed with her, and he was fixing to have to spend 9 hours with her on a flight. And so maybe he was saying things that were demeaning, which isn't right. It's not okay to do. But this, to me, seems like the time that she would start concocting her plan, part of her plan. Because somebody said, hey, you're being emotionally abused or verbally abused. And so she's like, well, somebody else thinks it like I think it, so it's got to be true, right? She has somebody to validate her thoughts, is what I think happened. And she ran with it. The physical abuse. In the middle of the first or second night of our Iceland trip, I was sound asleep when Mr. Maraschini woke up screaming at me. He was enraged, the likes of which I had never before seen. He was furious at me for sending a photo of us in Iceland to a friend of mine via Snapchat, which got back to him via another friend. I didn't think I had done anything wrong, and I couldn't understand why he was so mad, but he just kept screaming at me. He said he didn't want people to know we went to Iceland together, since he told everyone he was going alone. He told me he was embarrassed to be seen with me throughout the trip. He didn't want me in any of his social media posts or photos. Then he told me that if I went along with what he wanted, and was good on the trip, that maybe he would post photos of us together and tell people he was with me. He insulted me and put me down, repeated me calling me an effing psycho and crazy. Well, if the shoe fits. As he was screaming at me, I pulled out the note from the WOW Airlines passenger. I told him he treated me so badly that even a total stranger was concerned for my well-being. But he didn't seem to care and just brushed it off. I had never seen him so enraged and was afraid he would snap and hurt me. I felt like he wasn't even treating me like a human being. I cried myself to sleep that night. So here, she has changed her story about how Maraschini found out about this note. In the TEDx talk, she says he found it and ripped it up and was like, I knew that lady was listening. But here in her declaration, she said she pulled it out and showed it to him, and he didn't seem to care. He brushed it off. Nothing about tearing it up or the other stuff. So which story is correct, Owens? When I woke up the next day, on or around January 1st, 2017, Mr. Maraschini was in a totally different mood. He said he wanted to have a good trip and start things off differently. Abusers do this. Not saying Michael Maraschini is an abuser by any means. I don't know. I don't have all the facts. I have a woman that lies telling her side of the story. So I have to doubt her credibility and everything that she says. I hope this statement isn't true for her sake, and that Maraschini and whoever he's with now or whatever, they don't actually have to go through this. Maybe some of it's real and some of it's not. But I can't believe everything she says, because she lies. But abusers will be nice and the person that you met and fell for and everything, and then they'll be mean. And then they'll go back to the nice guy. And then they'll start being abusive again. It's the hot and cold that they continue to do, and it keeps you on your toes because you don't know which one you're going to get. But they make sure to remind you, see, I still am this nice guy that you met, remember? Like, it's still in me, don't you see it? That is a manipulation tactic for sure. Alright, trigger warning for the next part of this. If you cannot handle topics of domestic violence, sexual violence, or graphic detail, you can skip ahead in it, or you can close out of this video and just look out for your own mental health, and I will see you in the next video. But I just want to give that warning because it is very, there's a lot of detail about this incident going on. Continuing on. To kiss me. While we were making out, he used both of his hands to shove me into the headboard, causing my head to slam into it. He had never been rough with me like this before. Then he started to have sex with me. As he was having sex with me, he put his right hand around my neck and strangled me. I was having trouble breathing and started gasping for air. When I did this, he asked me if I liked it. It was hard to talk, but I managed to say no. He strangled me until he climaxed. Then he got off of me. I felt shocked and deeply confused. My neck and throat were sore. I remember lying in the bed and staring at the wall for a long time, trying to wrap my head around what he had just done to me. Mr. Maraschini just went back to sleep. Later that day, Mr. Maraschini wanted to have sex again. I wanted him to be affectionate and loving towards me, and didn't think he would hurt me again since it had never happened before. She wanted him to make love to her. While we were having sex, he told me to pick a number. I said 40. Then he used his open hand to slap my butt really hard. I said, ouch, and told him that hurt. Then he slapped my butt again. I told him to stop, but he kept going. He slapped me 40 more times in a row and counted down from 40 each time he did this. He told me that the harder he hit me, the more it turned him on. After we finished having sex, my butt was stinging and bright red. Yes, being slapped in the butt does hurt. It burns. It leaves little red marks. It is not pleasant. At least to me, anyways. I hate that. If it's like a pat is one thing, but just a huge smack, yeah, that does hurt. I told him I didn't like it and that he hurt me. Throughout the rest of the trip, Mr. Maraschini wanted to have sex daily. Every time we had sex, he strangled and hit my butt with his bare hand repeatedly. This happened between 12 and 15 times. My butt was bruised and sore from him hitting me. I asked him to stop slapping me every time, but he just laughed. Given his temper and since he is so much bigger than me, that's her feeling that he could overpower her. We got to make sure we state that. I felt like there was little I could do to fight back. I'm so tiny and he's so large. I could never hurt him. There was also a part of me that deeply wanted to be with Mr. Maraschini and wanted him to be attracted to me and affectionate, so I tried to put up with it. You can't force somebody to be attracted to you or to be affectionate with you. I don't like it when people try to push affection. They either want to or they don't want to. And if they don't want to, or they're not attracted to you, don't be with them. Find somebody who does find you attractive and that will be affectionate with you. Don't wait for them to change, because more than likely they're not changing. When he continued to strangle me during sex, I told him he was hurting me and I asked him why he did it. He said he wanted to be in complete control since I turned him on. He told me, I own you. I told him I don't like it and I wasn't okay with it and asked him to stop. No means no. He apologized and promised not to strangle or slap me again. You know, abusers make empty promises. So if he is an abuser, him saying he's not going to doesn't mean much. Throughout our trip, Mr. Maraschini continued to put me down and did things that felt like they were intended to hurt and manipulate me. For example, I am an animal lover, especially horses, which I ride for a living. And Mr. Maraschini has known this since we started dating. When we first got together, he claimed to love animals. During our trip, he ordered horse while we were out to dinner. Now, if he actually did this, that is a jerk move. That is wrong on so many levels, but don't do that. Like, if you want to eat horse, okay, but you know that this particular person is not the person to eat horse in front of. Maybe it was going to be your only time ever in life to ever try horse and you wanted to, but like that is a jerk move. I was appalled and had the waiter cancel the order, which that probably started a fight. But also, if you were scared of him, you wouldn't have dared cancel that order because you would be afraid of what the repercussions of that would be. You aren't going to be that bold. On another occasion, he got mad and made fun of me because I refused to eat whale or puffin. He said I was boring and that if I didn't eat whale or puffin, he didn't want to be with me since it proved I wasn't open to trying new things. I doubt he said that he was going to break up with you and not be with you if you didn't eat the whale or puffin. Like, no, I'm not buying that. We came back from Iceland on or around January 9th, 2017. On January 10th, 2017, Mr. Maraschini lost his job. Things got worse after this. He told me he was depressed and lost all motivation. So, y'all come back from y'all's trip on the 9th. The very next day, his first day back to work after this trip, he gets fired. Is that because he didn't get permission to go on this trip? He was gone longer than he was supposed to be? Did you make him lose his job by making him go, or him going to Iceland? He is also a grown man, and so if he knew that he could possibly lose his job going to Iceland, then, and he chose to go, well, that's on him. But that is very interesting. Things got worse after this. He told me he was depressed and lost all motivation, as we said. He was constantly angry. I felt like he resented me because I have a successful career that I'm passionate about. It also seemed like he wanted to isolate me from my family. No. You and your family are tight-knit. There is no isolating you from your family. Y'all are too close. I don't see that even remotely trying to happen. He said things like, your mom doesn't love you. You need to realize that. I had hoped the abuse would stop once we came home, but it didn't. Maraschini became more aggressive after he lost his job. Every time we had sex, he strangled me. This happened 4 to 5 times per week and at least 100 times total. He also frequently smacked my bare butt with his open hand, sometimes more than 50 times in a row. Sometimes he would tell me to take an Ambien, which is a sleeping pill that I had been recently prescribed. Before sex, that would be easier for him to have his way with me. Sex with Mr. Maraschini felt like abuse, not loving and intimate. Some people are into rough sex. Some people are into BDSM. Maybe Maraschini was into that stuff. And maybe you gave him permission to do that stuff. Maybe you didn't. But with Owens, she is the type of girl who will deal with and put up with and agree to whatever needs to be agreed to and done in order to keep the man. Her end goal is keep the man. So if he likes this, then that's what I'm going to let him do. Because otherwise he's going to leave me. And I don't want him to leave me. I don't want to be single. I'm not saying that's what she is doing, but it is one of the possibilities. We have to look at both sides. I often cried while we had sex. After he would finish having sex with me, I would tell him that he hurt me and asked him to stop strangling me. Sometimes he apologized and said that he just lost control. He'd swear he was going to work on himself and promise to stop. Other times he brushed it off and acted like I enjoyed it, even though I repeatedly told him I did not. On numerous occasions he told me that control was a turn-on for him and that he needed it since sex with me was too boring or too vanilla. Well, maybe it was. Maybe it is. In mid-February 2017, while we were having sex, Mr. Maraschini was on top of me. He put his left hand on my arm to hold me down. He squeezed so hard that I had a bruise for several days, which I took photos of a day or two later. See Exhibit 3. Then he used his right hand to strangle me. I could barely breathe. When I started gasping for air, he shoved 2 fingers down my throat, which caused me to gag. When I did this, he said, "Good girl. Good girl." She's not a dog. Like an actual, literal dog anyways. I felt panicked and didn't understand what he was doing. I was crying. I kept thinking, I don't want to do anything to upset him as he did this, since I don't want to push him over the edge. After he stopped having sex with me, I asked him why he put his fingers down my throat and told him I didn't like it. He brushed it off and ignored me. So you confronted him anyways, even though you were scared to upset him. You confronted him afterwards. You don't think he would have still done something there? He brushed it off and ignored me. On another occasion in February of 2017, Mr. Maraschini strangled me during sex so hard that it left red marks on my eyes. Or my neck, sorry. That's later. I sent pictures of the marks to my sister, but did not save these photos because I was afraid he would find them. I deleted many pictures and texts for this reason, which is her reason why she has no proof. And she keeps implicating and putting her sister in the middle of this stuff. She did it in the Clayton case. Her sister has the pictures of the 2 fetal sacks or whatever because she got a new phone. She doesn't have those anymore, but her sister does. Her sister has all the proof anybody could ever need to back up all of her stories, but yet we never get that. I hope she gets called as a witness in the Eckhart case. There were 2 occasions when I had marks on my neck where he had strangled me. I cannot remember exactly when it was, but I believe it was in May and July 2017. Sometime in February of 2017, I noticed tiny red spots around my eyes after Mr. Maraschini strangled me, which I now know is called petexual hemorrhaging. Did you Google that term? Did you Google tiny red spots around my eyes after being strangled? Or did you Google side effects from being strangled? Physical side effects? I'd love to know what Owens' Google history is, because you know she's busy on that Google researching things. She's not very good at researching things, because it's how she gets caught. See Exhibit 4 and see Exhibit 5. Sometimes my eyes were also bloodshot. I had dark circles around my eye sockets. Maybe because you're tired? Maybe because you cry all the time? Because you're very dramatic? Those can make your eyes bloodshot and give your eyes dark circles. At one point, my mom confronted me about the red spots and asked how I got them. I told her Mr. Maraschini was strangling me during sex and that I believed the tiny spots were a result of the strangulation. She believed they were. A doctor did not confirm this. Because I'd like to see the doctor that said, yep, that's what this is. On or around Valentine's Day weekend in February of 2017, we took a trip to Napa Valley. I had recently gotten a dog from a shelter who had been attacked and had a shaved head and stitches. The whole time Mr. Maraschini complained about how ugly the dog was. Well, maybe the dog was ugly. Maybe he wasn't cute right then. There is such thing as ugly animals and ugly babies. Does that mean that they don't deserve love and protection? No, they still deserve all that. He said he wanted to punt the dog. Once again, sounds like he's a playful type of person. Like he likes to kid around and joke, and she maybe has no sense of humor. Because we've heard people say, oh, like a Chihuahua, oh, it looks like a little rat dog, it's a wish dog, 'cause this dog is tiny. And I've heard people say that they look like it looks like a football, like if they're brown. I could just punt the dog across the living room. Would they actually do it? No. They're kidding, obviously. But like, I think he was probably kidding. I don't think he was actually going to do that. He told me I was cruel for keeping the dog alive because it was old and blind, ugly, and that I should let it die in a shelter. If he said this, that is shitty. Like, no. Just no. Don't say that to an animal lover. At one point, the dog had an accident in the hotel room. Okay, so you brought the dog to Napa Valley to a trip with you. Nobody could have watched it. Like your sister couldn't have watched it, your parents couldn't have watched it, a friend. You took it with you. Which, okay, it's okay to take your dogs on trips. But, like, did the hotel know you had it? Mr. Maraschini got mad at me and screamed at me for having a dog that wasn't potty trained. That makes some people very mad. When your dog pees in your own house or elsewhere, it can be very upsetting. Maybe he's mad she brought the dog on the trip with them because he was going to be a lot to handle, and they were supposed to be going on this trip for a weekend getaway for Valentine's. And now, like, it's going to smell like pee. And then the hotel guests that are in the future aren't going to like it because it smells like pee. The hotel itself is probably going to be mad because of that. Like, she shouldn't have brought the dog, I don't think. I think she could have done something with the dog while they went on this trip. During this trip, Mr. Maraschini strangled me during sex several times. Just casually throw that in there. Sometime in February of 2017, Mr. Maraschini asked me to take and pay for a trip to Dubai with him. He said it was a good time because he wasn't employed. He told me the trip would be good for us and help restore our relationship. So now you've been to Tony Robbins conference to help your relationship. You've gone to Iceland to help your relationship. And now you've gone to Dubai to help your relationship. None of them have worked. Nothing is fixing your relationship. He told me that he hasn't told me that he loved me yet, but said he had a feeling he would be ready to say it in Dubai. He often said he was almost ready to say I love you. So that's him, like, trying to gaslight her, is what she's pointing out. He didn't say it. Don't force people to say I love you. They either do or they don't, and they'll say it when they're ready. Sometimes somebody falls sooner than the other person. Some people are more standoffish. He doesn't sound like he really wanted to be in a committed relationship. He just wanted to have fun. They are young. I wanted good things for us and for him to be happy, so I agreed. He berated and verbally abused me throughout the Dubai trip in March 2017. He took me to a watch store and asked me to buy him a $10,000 watch and to be his sugar mama. So he's bringing up sugar mama again, apparently, and this is when she buys him this watch. I don't think it's a second $10,000 watch. I think it's just the only one. But that is your choice to buy him those things after you've already emptied your childhood savings account supposedly on him. You continue to go on these trips with him. Like, tell him, no, I don't have the money for this stuff. When we had sex, he strangled or slapped me every time. I felt abused and taken advantage of, and withdrew from him emotionally during this trip. In or around late March 2017, I was with Mr. Maraschini at my house when he started having sex with me on the couch. He was on top of me. He grabbed a pillow and put it over my face. He held it down with his right and was thrusting it into my face. I was wiggling under him and trying to get him off of me. I tried to scream, but could barely make a sound with the pillow smothering my face. It was hard for me to breathe. I remember thinking to myself, is he going to kill me? I felt like he was treating me like a cadaver, and that I was just a body he was abusing and having sex with. When he climaxed, he told me it was the best sex we had ever had. Gross. He told me he liked controlling my access to air, and he wanted to control every aspect of my life. I felt completely demoralized. Sometime in March 2017, I sought treatment for anxiety related to Mr. Maraschini's abuse of me. I was unable to sleep and was having nightmares and the night sweats. You were already being treated for depression. So, were you not continuing to be treated for that? Were you not continuing, and after the unaliving threats and stuff, were you not staying in contact with the psychiatrist? You sought treatment? Like, this wasn't mentioned in your talks and therapies with your doctors? It sounds like you weren't seeking treatment for anything, and so now you had to go find treatment for something. But you were supposedly already under a doctor's care for this stuff. In May of 2017, Mr. Maraschini, his mother, and his sister went into my apartment without my permission while I was not home. I had given Mr. Maraschini a key while I was traveling in April of 2017 and believed he made a copy without my permission. Why would you give him a key while you were gone? Is he coming in to water your plants? Is he coming to stay there? Is he coming to let the dog out that you say he hates and you're worried he's going to hurt? Why did you give him a key while you were away? And just for this trip, and then you made him give it back afterwards. I think she gave him a key so that he could come and go as he pleased, and her casa was his casa. So that he could come in whenever he wanted and stuff, like, because she wants that type of relationship. So I think she gave him a key for that purpose. He just happened to have one. I don't think he made a copy. I found out about his going there with his mother and sister when his mom mentioned to me that Maraschini had taken them into my house. I don't know why he would have taken them into your house, unless they were going to go have lunch, and he's like, hey, I got to go water the plants or let the dog out or whatever. So, we just need to swing by here real quick before we go or after we've been out to eat. And they could have stayed in the car, sure. I don't know if this is as nefarious as she's trying to make it seem. On or around June 9th, 2017, Mr. Maraschini and I were in Carmel when he tried to lock me in a sauna at a spa. I feel like that would have been a loud interaction. Like, you just try, like, holding the door shut or trying to lock it, but you are trying to get out. Where's the staff during this interaction that he tried to do this? Also during this trip, while we were walking around together at dusk, he used one hand to push me off the sidewalk and into a bush. I caught myself before falling. When I asked him why he pushed me, he just laughed and said he was having fun. Once again, he's trying to be playful. And you've been pushed into a shrub and a bush. I don't know if he was really pushing her because he was mad at her or if he was trying to be playful. I don't know. I wasn't there. In or around June 2017, Mr. Maraschini was having sex with me. He stopped having sex with me and then demanded I give him oral. He grabbed my head and thrust his pee into my mouth. He held the back of my head so I couldn't move it and thrust his pee so far down my throat. TMI, and I'm so sorry you had to just listen to those words. But if I have to read it and listen to it, so do you. And we're going to continue on to the next page with this interaction. So far that I threw up. This happened several times during our relationship. Gross, nasty, ugh. In or around June 2017, Mr. Maraschini suffocated me with the pillow again during sex. We were on the couch. I could barely breathe. I tried to scream, but nothing came out. I thought he was going to kill me. I remember feeling responsible for what he was doing to me and so sad that things had gotten to this point. I had gone from being a confident, independent woman, and now I'm being suffocated. I remember thinking it didn't matter if he killed me, since I had lost all self-respect anyway. At some point I lost consciousness completely. When I came to, I was on the bed with a pillow over me. His hand was pressing the pillow into my face. My head was shoved against the wall sideways. This was the most violent he had ever been towards me. Then he grabbed me and turned me around so that I was on my stomach. I couldn't lift my head up since I was so weak. Then he told me, "Get on your knees." I was in a total daze. I did what he said since I was afraid of what he would do if I didn't. He went in my mouth. I have never been so demeaned in my entire life. I didn't say a word to him after this. I felt completely broken as a human being and hated myself for being with someone who did this to me. I went to the bathroom. When I came back, Mr. Maraschini was asleep. In November of 2017, I brought up this incident to Mr. Maraschini after we had broken up. I asked him what type of man needs to suffocate and strangle a woman in order to get himself off. He told me that it was my fault because I brought it out of him. Ladies, that is not how this happens. Men, it is not your fault. You're not bringing it out of him. Do you irritate him, or can you annoy them or push their buttons and you know which ones to push? Yeah, we can do that with people, especially when we really know them. But abuse is never your fault. So if this happened, it was not her fault. If it didn't, you're evil for making this stuff up. I withdrew from the relationship after this. I was afraid of him and started spending less time with him. I traveled a lot from July to October of 2017 and hoped that by pulling back there would be a natural end to our relationship. When I tried to talk with him about us not seeing each other anymore, he'd tell me that he would work on being better. Stalking. By October of 2017, I was spending time with Mr. Maraschini sporadically and was deliberately trying to see less of him. I began canceling our plans since I didn't want to be around him. When I did this, he started showing up at places within a 2-block radius of my apartment that he knows I frequent. He also started coming to my house unannounced, even when I told him not to or was ignoring his calls or texts. In October or November of 2017, my insomnia worsened. So anxiety, depression, threats of unaliving yourself, and now insomnia. I was waking up in the middle of the night in a sweat from the nightmares about him trying to strangle and kill me. I was, and continue to be, constantly afraid of seeing him. Okay. Then why are you talking to him? When traditional antidepressants stopped working, my doctor prescribed ketamine therapy, which was administered directly by my doctor to treat my PTSD and depression, and not prescribed as a horse tranquilizer, contrary to what Mr. Maraschini's allegation and his declarations say. Ketamine is very serious. She also blames the incident of her passing out that is the start of her seizures. I don't know if maybe the ketamine was actually for the seizures and not the depression. Maybe it does treat PTSD. But that's a very serious thing to go to. It's what the Maya Kowalski case was about. I have had ketamine a couple of times in the hospital. One was when I had had a surgery and I started bleeding again, and I was in a lot of pain, and so they gave me that. And I've never done acid before, but I feel like that's what an acid trip would feel like. It was definitely out of this world for sure. It was weird. But I guess it worked for the pain, because while I was in that, I didn't know I was in pain. It's like you're in a different dimension. So if she was needing this, which I would love to see the medical records where this was actually done, then that's pretty serious. One Wednesday night in October of 2017, I was with my family at Maybeck's restaurant, less than 2 blocks away from my apartment. My family and I regularly have dinner at Maybeck's on Wednesdays, which Mr. Maraschini knew. He had come to Wednesday dinners at Maybeck's a couple of times and had criticized the restaurant and said it was terrible. Mr. Maraschini and his sister walked into Maybeck's and sat down 3 tables over. He stared at us. This made me very uncomfortable. Sometime in November of 2017, Mr. Maraschini asked if he could come over. I told him no. It was late and I was already in bed. 5 to 10 minutes later, he showed up at my house and knocked at my front door. I stayed in bed and ignored him. He banged on the door and yelled my name and said he knew I was home because he could hear the TV. I was worried my neighbors would get upset with the loud banging and yelling, so I opened the door. I asked him why he came since I told him not to. He said he was in the neighborhood. Then he started trying to have sex with me. At the front door? Just right there? In front of your neighbors? Like, y'all didn't even make it inside? Then he started trying to have sex with me. I was too afraid of him to stop him. While we were having sex, he asked me, how does it make you feel to know I'm sleeping with a tall blonde girl? Like, the end, sex would be over. She's the complete opposite of you physically. I told him I didn't care. Then he said, doesn't that make you jealous? I like to see you jealous. It's a turn on. Then he held me down using his left hand and strangling me. This was the last time we had sex. Do you have the text message for this interaction? Or is that one you deleted because you were afraid he would see it and get mad? You should have proof of this. I tried to avoid engaging with Mr. Maraschini and hoped he would just leave me alone. He continued to contact me and asked to see me. I was polite and cordial to him since I was afraid of what he would do to me if I wasn't. Where is the message that he was contacting you, asking to see you? You should have multiple messages of that if that happened. On or around November 28th, 2017, Mr. Maraschini sent me a text message saying that he saw me and my family at Mamanuku. I sent him a text message to ask him where he was at the restaurant. She does have the text message exchange of this, so we'll look at that. He responded, I was at the bar in the corner. I saw you all when you were walking out and we were just being served. What did you think of it? It made me very uneasy that he happened to be at the restaurant the same time I was at it, which was in the 2 blocks of my apartment, and that he saw me there and said nothing at the time, so he didn't approach you. I was afraid to walk down the street alone because I felt like he was stalking me. Starting in December 2017, I had my parents or friends pick me up or drop me off at my front door, or I would take an Uber or a Lyft everywhere, even if it was to go a couple of blocks. Even though he does not live in my neighborhood and had told me he was moving to Sacramento, I saw him at least 10 times within a 2-block radius of my apartment between December 2017 and the end of January 2018. So she's saying 10 times within a month she saw him. Call the police. Report the stalking. Because that could be, if that was an abusive relationship and you see him this many times, and he just keeps showing up. Now I get it might be hard for them to do anything because he hasn't threatened you or done anything to you at this point, but at least it would be acknowledged in the police reports so that if something ever does happen, you've called about this before and there's at least like a paper trail of it. In December of 2017, I posted on Instagram that I was going to dinner at Mamanoku. An hour later, Mr. Maraschini showed up there while I was having dinner with my mother. He walked inside and came directly to our table. He was with a tall blonde woman who he introduced us as Callie. He lingered at the table for a minute or so before sitting down at the table next to us, although there were plenty of open tables elsewhere. This made my mother and me so uncomfortable that we left. Okay, so you had already been there an hour or so. And so did you leave because you were uncomfortable, or did you leave because you were done with your food? And you were done eating? I may spend that. And he introduced you to the girlfriend. Also, if you are scared of this man and you don't like him showing up all the time, why are you posting your location or where you're going online where he can see it? Stop posting your locations. Also, block him to where he shouldn't be able to see it. I know there's ways around it, but if you feel like you have to post about it, you need to take measures to ensure your safety. After meeting Callie, I started thinking about how terrible I would feel if Mr. Maraschini hurt her. I did nothing to warn her of the capacity of his violence. I wish I had known how abusive Mr. Maraschini was before I fell for him, and I considered telling her about my experiences. So she wants to be Callie's stranger. The next day, Mr. Maraschini contacted me and asked me to make dinner. I said no. He got upset that I turned him down, and we got into a huge argument. I confronted him about his lies and the physical abuse. He did not deny choking or smothering me with a pillow. One Thursday in mid or late December of 2017, my parents were crossing the street to meet me at Amici's in the Marina, a restaurant that I regularly go to with them and had been to several times with Mr. Maraschini. He tried to stop my parents as they were walking, but they didn't engage with him. Because of whatever lies you told him, or I doubt it, because they liked him. But they also believe everything you say, even if it's not true. While we were eating, he walked by the restaurant window 3 times and stared at us. Call the police. A few days after this, I was at Amici's again. Mr. Maraschini walked by the restaurant and peered inside the restaurant as he passed. He made eye contact with me, and about 10 minutes later, he walked by and stared at me a second time. I have been going to Barry's Boot Camp, a gym around the corner from my house, daily since before we started dating. Throughout our relationship, he made fun of me for going. Why would he make fun of you for going to the gym? Like, you look like a person that actually takes care of themselves. Like, you probably go work out, and you eat healthy, and like, because you have a good figure. And seems like he does too. So why is he making fun of you for doing this? It makes no sense. Then, in December of 2017, Mr. Maraschini joined the gym, even though he does not live in the neighborhood. Call the police. Do something about it. On January 5th, 2018, I was at Mamanoku with my friend Joan. We were sitting by the window having dinner when I saw Mr. Maraschini walking towards the restaurant with a blonde woman. They stopped directly in front of me, our table outside the restaurant window, and Mr. Maraschini stared at us. I was afraid to look at him and tried to avoid eye contact. They walked away, but he came back a few minutes later by himself and stood directly outside of the window by our table. He stared inside at us and tried to get our attention. We ignored him. A minute or so later, he entered the restaurant and stood at the hostess stand, which was directly in front of me. He stared at me. I was so uncomfortable and afraid that I looked down to avoid eye contact with him. Then he walked towards the back of the restaurant and continued to stare at us for another 10 minutes or so. I felt like he was trying to intimidate me. I was too afraid to leave the restaurant while he was there in case he tried to follow me home. So, he's walking by the restaurant with Callie. And then he comes back without Callie. Where did Callie go? And Callie didn't think it was weird that he just stopped and was staring inside the restaurant they had gone to previously. And if he's doing this, that is scary. And then you were like, oh, I can't leave because he might follow me home. He knows where you live. You haven't moved since you've been with him. So whether he follows you to your house or he goes to your house like you said he has before, that to me is not a reason for you to not leave the restaurant. Like, are you afraid on the way to the house? Like, you're afraid he's going to follow you home? Or are you afraid of what he's going to do when you leave the restaurant on your way to the house? But you didn't say that. You wanted to add in the stereotypical stuff. Oh, I didn't want him to know where I lived when somebody's being stalked. You got to hit all these stereotypical points. But it doesn't make sense in your case because he knows where you live already. It would be different if you had moved and were in a different location and you didn't want him to know where that place was. But that's not the case here. On January 6, 2018, I decided to contact Callie blank via Facebook Messenger, the woman Mr. Maraschini had introduced me to. See Exhibit 7, the messages that were sent. I sent her a message telling her that I would have given anything for someone to try to reach out to me before I got deeply involved with him. I told her about the red flags that I should have paid closer attention to, such as Mr. Maraschini's lies about his career and prior romantic endeavors. I wrote that he became physically abusive about 6 months into our relationship, and I simply don't want someone else to be hurt by him. I told her about the attached the picture of the note from the WOW Airlines passenger. I also wrote, regardless if you do anything with the information I shared with you, I would beg you not to share it with Mike or bring up my name since he truly scares me at this point. We will look at those messages. I believe in this part 2. On January 7th, 2018, I had dinner with my parents at Mamanoku. As we finished, they asked, don't you want us to take you home in case you see Mike? I said no, since they were parked in a different direction, and it would take me less time to just walk home. Okay, so you're scared of this guy. He shows up all the time, and he hasn't shown up at this particular incident, or this date. He hasn't shown up at Mamanoku like he has before. And so now, I don't know how big the parking lot is, but okay, you're parked in different directions. If you are scared for your safety, you wouldn't say no. You would be like, yeah, if you could, it would be really appreciated it. So she has dinner, and then as she was walking home, she saw Mr. Maraschini and his sister. They were less than 1.5 blocks away from my house. They were standing by the sidewalk staring at me. I was looking down at my phone and tried to pretend like I didn't see them. Mr. Maraschini yelled at me, "Are you kidding me?" Then his sister called me a psychopath. Well, you kind of are. They screamed at me for sending a Facebook message to Callie. When I pulled my phone out to call my parents, his sister said, "Don't you dare." Yeah. Okay. So don't call your parents, don't call your sister. They were standing in front of me, which prevented me from walking past them. A couple was coming out of a nearby restaurant. As they were walking past, I told Mr. Maraschini to stay away from me, and I was going to seek a restraining order. She wants people to hear her saying that know that she's in a scary situation. She needs the people around her to know this. I was terrified and hysterical. I called my parents to tell them what happened. Then I asked my friend Joan to come over, since I was afraid of Mr. Maraschini and his sister would come back to my house. In the middle of the night, around 1 a.m., I got a phone call from the San Francisco Police Department. They told me that Mr. Maraschini had emailed them a copy of the message I had sent to Callie and asked if I knew why. So they reported you for harassing behavior. I said no and told them that he and his sister had accosted me on the street. I don't know if they accosted you. I mean, they may have confronted you, but I don't know if they just did that or just being aggressive with it. They questioned me about the domestic violence I alleged in the message and asked if they could come take a report. When the police arrived, I explained the circumstances surrounding the message I sent to Callie and the history of the physical abuse and the stalking. The next day, I was afraid to leave my house. I didn't know what to do, so I contacted the sheriff, asking for help figuring out how to get a restraining order. I also spoke with someone from the district attorney's office that day. They asked if I wanted to file criminal charges, but I said no. So, you also say that you contacted a domestic abuse place too, and that they were just kind strangers and everything. But you don't put that in your declaration at all. They would have also been able to help you get this restraining order, and you wouldn't have had any problem figuring it out with the help of them. So why didn't you mention that in your declaration? She said she did not want to file criminal charges. They asked if she wanted to. On January 9th, 2018, I filed a request for a domestic violence restraining order. On January 10th, the court granted me a temporary restraining order, a TRO. It is not hard to get a TRO. Just a temporary one that's put in place because they rather be on the side of caution than the other side where they didn't grant it and then something ends up happening and the courts could have at least put something to protect them. I mean, it is just a piece of paper, but the courts don't want that on their hands. Police don't want that on their hands either. Since Mr. Maraschini has violated the temporary restraining order and has continued to show up at places he knows I frequent within a block or two of my apartment. For example, on January 28th, Mr. Maraschini posted on Instagram that he was at De La Rosa, which is across the street from my house. Okay, I can see that's somewhat creepy. Why are you on his Instagram? How did you find out Callie's last name? Did you stalk Maraschini's Facebook? Find a girl named Callie? And that was blonde and looked like the girl? And then that's how you find her? Why do you know what is on his Instagram? Why are you seem like you're stalking too. Because otherwise, you wouldn't have known that. Unless you saw him. Stay off of his page. Block him. He also went to Barry's boot camp less than 300 yards from my house on at least 2 separate occasions since the TRO has been in place. Okay. Were you at the boot camp when he went? Or were you not, but you know from Instagram or something? Also, if you have a temporary restraining order and you're somewhere and you see somebody that you have a restraining order against, you could have gone to the employees or a manager at Barry's boot camp and probably said, hey, I have a restraining order on the guy that just walked in. Is there any way that you can make him leave? And there's a bunch of buff guys and stuff in there, right? And usually they will, because it's a court order, and also they don't want anything happening on their property. They don't want to be brought into a situation. Also, on or around March 22nd, 2018, I was heading to dinner with my mom at Mamanoku again. Stop going to the same restaurants. You've been to Mamanoku 5 times at least in this declaration. Like, you know that he goes there too. Whether he said he liked it or he didn't like it. No, you shouldn't have to change your life either, but, you know, if it's what you have to do, it's what you have to do. They're the person that's supposed to leave, but sometimes you just have to take extra steps and think about your own safety. We parked on the street and we were walking towards the restaurant. I saw Mr. Maraschini standing out in front of Mamanoku looking up and down the street. We turned around and walked away. And you shouldn't have had to in that situation if, in fact, he is the abuser. But also, because you have the TRO, he should have been the one that walked away. Whether it is actually legit or you got it falsely, the fact that you had one, you don't necessarily have to leave. And then we go into why I want a restraining order. I generally think that Mr. Maraschini wants to kill me. Given that he has strangled me and choked me, I know that he is capable of inflicting lethal violence. He has never done this when he's gotten mad at you. That's something that you have never stated in this declaration. You have said that it's during sex. And so he likes it rough, or you told him that you could do it. Maybe he's into BDSM and you allowed it. And if he's going too far in sex, you know, that's not great either. But I don't know that he is like mad and just beating you to death and doing all these things at the drop of a hat. He has not threatened you since he's left and y'all haven't been together. So I don't know. There is a deep hatred that exudes towards me, and I'm afraid for my life. He has said it to me in the past that if I ended up dead, he knew he would be blamed for it. Why is that? Because you would, well, you wouldn't be blaming him for it, but you definitely would have made it, if you did it to yourself, you would have definitely made it look like he did it to you. But maybe he did say that because you're crazy. His hair-triggered temper horrifies me. I am afraid that if I encounter him alone, he will lose control and harm me. I do not want to live in constant fear of him and hope that the restraining order will send a message to Mr. Maraschini to stay away from me. I want to move on with my life. Move on. You're not with him anymore. You're out of the relationship. Start anew. Block him. Enforce the temporary restraining order. Call the police when he violates it. There's a bunch that you could do. and he's not harmed you so far. Has not done anything to you except for be where you're at, or you've been where he's at. I don't know which way it goes at this point. This is just your point of view. And not to say that just because he hasn't done something so far doesn't mean that something won't happen in the future. That does happen to victims. So that is her declaration. We are going to end the video there. And in true Loud Little Ducky fashion, we have a quote of the day. I like to end the videos with these and make you think. So we have, stand up for yourself and your rights as a human being. You are strong. You are beautiful. That includes you men too. And there is more to life than walking on eggshells. And this was given by a domestic violence survivor. And that is very true. You are strong. You are beautiful. And if you have to walk on eggshells for anybody, you don't need that in your life. Whether it's walking on eggshells because of a boss or a coworker, whether it's in a relationship or a family, get rid of that negativity in your life. You don't need it. There are other places. And trying to keep you from being your real self, and anything that you do, you're worried that something is going to happen. It's just not a way to live. So you do have the strength and the wherewithal to get out of these situations, no matter who it's with. You are worth more than all of this. So please remember that. And if you want to stay for part 2, which we will go over exhibits and we will see the messages between Owens and Callie, as well as hear a little bit from Marashini's perspective. Make sure you're subscribed and have that notification bell turned on. Please like this video. I also have a message after this, so please stay tuned for that, and I will see you in the next video. Bye! If you or someone you know is suffering from domestic violence, whether it's verbally, physical, emotional, sexual, you can call the National Domestic Violence Hotline at 1-800-799-SAFE. That's 1-800-799-7233. They also have an online chat where you can go to thehotline.org. Please seek help.